Hello, everybody, and welcome to Leadership Mastery TV. It's the 17th of March, 2020, and we're so excited to have Rosalyn Palmer with us today. So, as you know, our Leadership Mastery is all about wanting to reach out to you, our audiences, our listeners, and to give you exceptional guest speakers that are going to add value not only to your life, but when you go out there in your environment, when you're there impacting other people in any leadership role, you know that you're going to have another skill under your belt. So I'm going to read Rosalyn's bio. She's an exceptional person, so many experiences, and I know that you're really going to benefit out of today's show. So Rosalyn is in business. She was a self-made millionaire at the age of 40 and is now an award life coach and a business coach. She's advanced rapid transformational hypnotherapist and clinical therapist and is an NLP trained coach. And you know how qualified NLP trained coaching is because they not just talk about your physiology, they're looking at your neurosystems, they understand your language patterns, and more so, they really work with your timeline therapy and the behavioral patterns that you have. She's the co-host of Radio Girls Around Town and also has a monthly newspaper column. Rosalyn is a best-selling author, and I'm going to stop there because I know she's going to be telling some things about her as well and her journey. She's had many challenges, and I'm sure it's them experiences that are really contributing to the exceptional things that she's going to be sharing with us. So, Rosalyn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. So hi, thank you for having me here today. It's lovely. Yes. So, wow, it's really weird when you hear your own CV being read out, isn't it? Yeah. So yes, I've had, do they call it slash? I've had many careers. Also, what I do now is, as you say, clinical hypnotherapist, transformational therapist, slash coach, slash NLP based business coach, slash radio presenter, slash newspaper columnist, slash author. So it's really interesting, my journey that I ended up here. And I've come via many staging posts. As you say, I was a self-made millionairess at 40. My former career was public relations and also marketing. So I went into that career in the 80s and then was a massive success in the 90s. And I'm sure we can talk more because also some of the people I had as clients, I think would be slightly interesting to your audience because it's the likes of people like Tony Robbins. I then pretty much lost everything. My life imploded through cancer, through a lot of life changes, through a whole chain of events that happened in a very short period. So I had to reinvent myself, and I went into training and development. I then was head of marketing and communications for an international charity. And then 5 years ago, I trained in my current role, although arguably I've been in that role for a lot longer, and I was very much immersed in the world of coaching and therapy in the 90s. It just, I wasn't a coach or therapist per se. So yes, that's my business journey, I suppose, really, yes.
All right. So how did you get to where you are? And I know you shared the skim of things, but on an emotional level, or what made you decide that you wanted to choose this career path? What was the turning point?
Well, it was synchronicity in so much as I was just going through a separation and an impending second divorce, which was really not something I ever set out to do. I'd hit the menopause. I wasn't feeling great about myself. I think I'd had a bit of a crisis of my identity. My father had died. I'd moved to live very near him to effectively be part-time carer for him. And I hit a glass ceiling really in that role within the international charity. So it was yet another point in my life where it was like, what next? And an email landed in my inbox from Marisa Peer, who had just had her methodology certified and made into a certified training course. And she personally reached out to the first people, the pioneers as she called them, for her course. And I just was already in that mind place, because I was thinking about going into coaching or possibly some form of therapy, and that it was synchronicity. So I felt like I had nothing to lose, and I did the course, and I had my first client the day after I graduated. So I then found from almost thinking, oh, we'll see how it goes. And I'll be honest, the subtext was, if it does nothing, it will help me. That was really my position. And I still kept a foot in the world of marketing and PR and communication. So for a year, I moved into a consultancy role. I was working for the charity I'd been working for. I worked for a number of international trade charity associations, because once you're known in those worlds, you know, people will reach out to you. And whilst I built my therapy business up, then what happened is the therapy business took off really well, and I found that my go-to client was burnt out Barbara, or burnt out Bob, as I like to call them, because that was me. This very high functioning executive business person who everything looks great on the surface but is hanging on by their fingernails, because that was me in the 90s. And they then said to me, we'd like to continue this journey. You've dug out the roots, you've gone back to the root causes and really helped me heal myself and move beyond some of these self-sabotaging and terrible behaviors. We now want to continue, and you know about business, you know about, you know, and I became a coach in name, and then I felt, well, I better get some sort of certification for this. Although I had trained in NLP business in the 90s, so that became a natural place for me to gravitate back to, and then I was able to add that offering to the therapy as well. So yes, that's how we are having the conversation today, and why, you know, a lot of the roles that I now play are indeed where I'm at.
And so you've worked with business clients, obviously. When you're looking at the business client, what is one of the common, I'm not going to say negative, but what is the common challenging emotions that they face? Because obviously, you know, they may be successful in businesses. And I know myself as a leadership coach, when I'm working with clients and I look at them, and, you know, you mentioned earlier that you can look into the eyes and you know definitely that's not the story. They're just making something up. So you've really got to dig deep and find out what's going on there. So what are a few of the common traits that you've found?
So, I mean, a lot of people call it not enoughness. I think that's a good umbrella, but I think for me, what I see is it's the hiding behind the mask. And a lot of people have to have that mask. I did myself. It took me a really long time to work out that whilst I was a really big success in PR, I was actually at heart an introvert. I did an English literature degree. You sit in rooms and read books. You know, I didn't do a drama degree. I like my own company. I like reading. I'm quite a deep thinker. I nearly did philosophy and psychology, you know, so I'm more in that territory. But then I'm in this incredibly crazy world of PR right from the 80s, when I worked for Lynn Frank's PR, which the TV series and movies Absolutely Fabulous is based on. So I really was in that world, on the Orient Express, working for the Rolling Stones, going to crazy parties, people coming out of cakes. You know, it was the 80s and then the 90s. So I hid behind a mask. I looked like a very confident extrovert, and yet I would literally go home and close the door and kind of go, oh, you know. But what happens is, and this is exactly what happened to me, but nobody really explained it well to me, even though I was reaching out for therapy all through the 90s, was there was a mismatch, a dichotomy between this person that you present and almost, you know, become, and celebrities would be a perfect example here, and this person who you kind of fundamentally are. But what happens in those moments is you just feel the pain of the disconnect. You're disconnected from your authentic self. And you don't know how to get back there. In fact, you don't even know who that authentic self is. So what I see with a lot of these very high performing business people I work with is they feel incredibly sad, and they feel like something is missing, you know, like that movie, Is This As Good As It Gets? You know, it's like they get there and they're like, is this it? Why do I feel so empty? And then they obviously try and fill themselves up with all sorts of usually very unhealthy things. But more than that, they're very afraid that even if I had something and went, here's a magic wand, tomorrow you will wake up and be your authentic self. They're terrified that they might not know that person, they might not like that person, and what will that mean to this world that they've built up over here? What will that mean to all their relationships and everything else? So there's a massive, so it's more than I'm not even enough. It's that I feel wrong. I feel a disconnect. I don't feel at one with myself. I don't know how to make myself happy. And I'm even afraid that if I do the deep digging and go there, how will I integrate that and make that part of this world that I've created as my reality? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. We've been there. I think it took me a number of years when the realization was sad that most of my life I was living a life meeting other people's expectations, and as long as they were happy, it was imposter syndrome that, oh my God, because they're happy, I'm happy. And then when everything went crashing down and my husband died, and everybody just sort of, you know, didn't want to get involved because they were afraid that they were going to be blamed for giving me the confidence to stand on my own 2 feet. And it was worse than the bereavement side of things. It was hard to accept that, oh my God, I thought these were the people, even my own, that were going to be there for me forever, and they weren't. And it's then that I realized that I wasn't really living the person that Pushpa was. I'd been living an external, I had the businesses, I had everything, but it wasn't what I wanted. So,
and we so often do that. I mean, right from childhood, we're cast into roles that, you know, we didn't audition for, as I put in my book. You know, you think, oh, I'm in this role, I don't ever remember auditioning for it. You know, often the expectations of our parents, or the one that you become to fit in with the family. You become the joker, you become I became the golden haired girl who, you know, got the A's at school and was head of everything, and Girl Guide representative for Nottingham. I had my own radio show at 15, first person in my entire extended family for both sides to ever go to university. But it was because I was sort of cast into that role in a way, and then all those expectations were on me, and so I became incredibly driven because I didn't want to let anybody down. And then, you know, my first husband, although we worked together, he was very comfortable with me playing that role. But what happened was I started to get dis-ease. I started to get unwell because I had quite a compromised immune system from being very ill as a child and having had a lot of antibiotics. And that started turning up. So then, luckily, I did spend a lot of time, effort and energy and money in, you know, I was vegetarian for years. I really watched what I ate. I kind of really, even in the 80s, I understood about macrobiotic food and nutrition way ahead of its time. I did acupuncture. So again, in my book, I say I did a lot of things really well. And then I did some things really badly. Like drink too much and get 5 hours sleep a night and only get to sleep if I took sleeping tablets. And later, after I'd had dengue fever and lost a lot of weight and became very thin, which at the time was very attractive, became bulimic, so that I could keep looking really, really good. So there was this weird dichotomy in my life about, I'm doing all these really good things. I've got an Ayurvedic doctor, and I'm doing mind stuff. I'm doing NLP. I see therapists. I you know, you name a personal development book, I'd read it in the 90s. So I do lots of really good stuff, and then lots of really not very good stuff.
Yeah. Wow. What's your book called? It's
called Reset, A Blueprint for a Better Life. Because so many times in my life, I just thought, oh, you know, like on the computer, if I could just press the reset button and kind of debug it and, you know, bring it back together. And so and my life has been reset so many times. I had that, you know, glittering career in PR and marketing, but, you know, self-made. I had an 8-bedroom house in London. I was a millionairess by 40. I moved to the Bahamas. Everything looked great. I looked like I'd dodged a bullet. But I hadn't. And then it all imploded. My father had a stroke. He was very unwell. Then I had breast cancer. And then we had a hurricane that destroyed most things. Then I discovered a lot of financial loss because my ex-husband had been making a lot of investments at that time of startup companies. And I was not looking at the accounts, because funnily enough, when you're having cancer treatment and your father's having, and then my mother got pancreatic cancer. And all of that was in an 18-month period. And so basically that all imploded. The marriage couldn't happen in trees together. Yeah. So I came back, having left in a bit of a blaze of glory. I came back basically an unemployed single mother with 2 children in rented accommodation. So certainly my ego took a bit of a bash.
Look at you now.
I know. And so I am, what my clients love and what I feel good about is I'm wholly congruent, you know, I'm wholly authentic. And so my book tells this story, but it's not like some sort of boring, oh, and then this happened and then that happened. What I do is I'll episodically look at these things that happened in my life. I will say, here's some good stuff I did, here's some maybe not so good stuff I did, and then I'll wear my therapist and coach hat and say, if you were going through that, here's how I navigate with clients going through that today. So that's why the reset is about my story. The reset is to give people hope that they can reset even in their darkest hour. And the blueprint is about, well, here is a blueprint.
I love it. That's fantastic. And I suppose, like with your journey, I know a lot of everybody, but I know a lot of women will really resonate with that as well.
Absolutely. Ironically, the worst thing that happened to me was probably the menopause, to be honest. Because when the menopause hits, because by that time I'd hit that reset button a few times. I'd come back, I'd reinvented myself, I worked for a training and development company, I'd remarried, I had a lovely house because my mother had died and I'd had an inheritance, and then some, you know, I'd sort of birthed out, and I kind of thought, oh, good. And then literally the menopause derailed me because I'd had breast cancer. I had a very early aggressive menopause and I couldn't take any like HRT or anything, and there wasn't a lot of help. 15 years ago. And I thought I was going mad. I think through even all the other stuff, I still was a bit of a warrioress, and I kind of felt this sense of I can get through this, and all I need is within me, and the warrior cry, and all the stuff I'd come through business being, you know, that you don't come through business not learning some of those things. And I think it got me through all of that. But when the menopause came, I was like, I don't even know who I am. Who am I? You know, that was awful, actually.
Oh, but look at you now. I mean, you look fantastic.
I've reset again.
It's what you're sharing is such a phenomenal tool, I think, and it's so needed now, especially, I'm not going to, you know, say because of the virus, just over the last 15, 20, 30 years. people have literally plummeted, and they've lost that human aspect. Like during the 80s, 90s, even 70s, we had to live that journey. And now what people are looking for is the easy thing. So they're still living that imposter syndrome, and they're thinking that everything that we get on the skim is what's right. They've lost that connection. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. And funny enough, one of my other cohorts of people I deal with are probably late teens, early 20s, young people who are self-harming, who are depressed, who are suicidal, who are crashing out of university. Ironically, they're the kind of sons and daughters of the very high-performing people often, or they're their friends' sons and daughters. And I think the pressures today to look a certain way, to behave a certain way, social media pressure. I write about this a lot in my columns and in my blogs, and it's one of my, bugbears, if you like, is it was bad enough. I mean, when I had the PR company, you'd keep an eye on the competitors and stuff, but most of my really, making my millions was mostly done before, well, I sold my business in 2000, so it was done in the 80s and the 90s. And we didn't really have that social media, Me Too, media pressure world. I had a friend in PR and she gave up in the early noughties because of the BlackBerry coming in, because everybody called it the Crackberry. And you were on call 24/7. You couldn't even pretend that you hadn't heard the call. So I think the pressures are enormous, and I think it's really unhealthy. And I really feel for people, and I know what you're saying, and we're in very challenging times, and I'm looking for the good that's coming out of these challenging times, because sometimes if it makes you take stock and makes us all a bit kinder to each other and not get caught up in this media induced world that a lot of us are living in, then I'm not downplaying all the other terrible things, but that will be a good outcome. When I worked for the international charity, I was head of marketing and communications. It was for the leprosy mission. Now, people with leprosy arguably are the most marginalized, discriminated against people in the world. In India, even the untouchables will not touch them. And I can tell you that, having felt like I'd pretty much lost everything and was having to reinvent myself, standing in the slums of Ethiopia with somebody who's got no hands and is living in a cardboard house with mud on the walls is an incredible level up. It's an incredible wake-up time. So all my time in Africa and India, and then I was a trustee of a charity helping ex-offenders, people who we need to give another chance, who we need to integrate back into society, not shun. All of these, outliers. I had such a heart for all these outliers and all these disrespected people that, that made me, those moments when I was like, oh, I used to have a really big house and everything. I'd go, get a grip.
Because we, like the offenders, they've been caught, but we as human beings have made so many mistakes, and, some could probably be worse than what the offenders have done. It's just that we didn't get caught and we're still here.
Also, recidivism, reoffending is huge. Okay, it's about, I think even after a first offence, it's about 45% in England. And if you want to be brutal about it, just the cost to society of then having to, capture the crimes they'll do, and then having to find them and put them through the legal system and then lock them up again and keep them there. To work with them, and one of the charities I worked for did an in-prison program where they brought recidivism down to 4%.
Wow.
From 45. And if you just from an economics point of view, even if we're not talking about the morality of giving people a second chance, it's a bit of a no-brainer. But unfortunately, because of what's happened, the move towards just big lock them up and don't get them out till later kind of prisons, as unfortunately, you know, been what's happened. So I think we've done some not great things in society for the last 20, 30 years. And I see one by one the tail end of that, you know, the people coming to me as clients because they're very broken. And of course, the worries of what's going on around them exacerbates how they're feeling inside. But I'm sure you're getting a feeling here that
I can.
Not just am I qualified, but I really care. You know, I really care. I really want people not to go through some of the pain that I've had to go through, or I've seen people around me go through.
I love it. I can hear the passion in your voice, and thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing today. I know this is going to reach a lot of people, and just the way that you've personalized it, it's evident that it's not, you know, you're not wanting to do something for the sake of doing it. Is because you really care about making that difference. If there was one tip that you could give our listeners today, what would that be?
So particularly from a business context, I would say that self-leadership is key.
Okay.
So to be a leader, to be a beacon, to make this world a better place with your business, with your ideas, with what you do, start with yourself as well. You need to do some deep work and get out some of those self-sabotaging or unhappy behaviors but that self-leadership, that trusting and knowing who you are, that sense of self is so crucial. Put every bit of your effort into that and be kind to yourself. I have a very quick philosophy. A life of balance is 5 F's.
Yes.
Friends, family, faith, fitness, and finance. So always remember you need all 5. Have faith in something bigger than yourself. Surround yourself with friends or your tribe. Look to your family if you can. Again, it could be your community. Finance is important. Money can be a force for good. Charities would be in a lot of trouble if people weren't philanthropic and made more money than they need.
Sure.
And fitness. Be fit in your mind and your body.
Excellent. I love it. And that really resonates with the ancient wisdom that I teach, because leadership started at probably 4 or 5 years old, and it started from teaching yourself on how to be that, you know, that ruler of a kingdom or the ruler of the world, but it had to start from you. Rosalyn, what can I say? Thank you so much for being my guest today. You know, I hope that we do connect, you know, both coming from the UK. I'm sure we will at some point.
Yeah, we have a lot in common already. I feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for being our guest on Leadership Mastery TV and reaching out to millions of people that are going to be listening to the key message that you have. I'll be putting a link in, so if anybody's interested in getting a book and, you know, getting it, can they order on Amazon?
My therapy, the book is on Amazon all over, and
excellent.
also my therapy and coaching. I do most of it on Zoom, so
all right, excellent.
That's, even in these times, in a way, in these times, it's even more applicable, really.
Absolutely. So once again, thank you, and I wish you well in everything that you do. I know we will connect, and I'm sure we're probably going to do something together that will make a bigger impact.
Why not? We need to be the light bearers. Let's go for it.
All right. Cool. Thank you, Rosalyn. Have a beautiful day.
Thanks, everybody.